Hello, my dear friends. You're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of September. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, I would like to say that the front line has been stabilized totally and finally. And mainly I'm talking about the north area in LPR region, Kharkiv region, on the north in this area. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that Ukrainians still had or have some possibilities to develop their counteroffensive operation and to be on the safe side, to have the better position in this area. But for these purposes, they need to cross Seversky Donets River and to establish bridgehead on this side of the river. And according to the report we got from the many sources, we see and we understand that Ukrainians did manage to cross this river and that they managed to establish control over a few towns like Staroy Karavan, Brusovka, Ozernaya. Furthermore, they managed to establish control over Shurova. And today we got some pictures and videos from town Svetogorsk, from this town. And as you can see, all this town is located right on the river bank, on the north bank of the river or the west bank of the river, Seversky Donets. You need to understand that it's not a very difficult job to establish pontoon bridges in this forest. So this is the only area that Ukrainians managed to establish control over. The Russians are saying that there have been 4 days of very heavy clashes in this area between the river and Liman and Yampol. The Ukrainians moved a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles, a lot of infantry just with one purpose: to develop their success that they achieved in the north of Kharkiv and to storm and to take control over Liman and Yampol, over these two towns. But the Ukrainians were defeated. They were defeated heavily. They had a lot of losses. The Russians didn't provide any information, but anyway, today we got some information from the open source that the Russians managed to move their professional army. This area used to be under protection of the volunteer corps, of LPR forces and something like this, and today the Russians moved their professional army, and now there is no chances for the Ukrainians to cross this area or to take Liman. The Russians understand the value of this bridgehead and the value of these towns, so anyway they will fight here till the last soldier, it's obviously. So the front line has been stabilized. Today we got a lot of reports from the area between Seversk and Solidar, between this area. Some Russian sources were saying that the Ukrainians, or also the Ukrainians, were saying the same thing, that they managed to take control over Bilogorovka. And today there was a lot of discussion, a lot of topics about this town, because if you take a look at the Russian sources map, you're gonna see that according to this map, this Bilogorovka has been taken. This Bilogorovka is located in Lugansk district, but there is another Bilogorovka that located in Donetsk district, this one. This Bilogorovka is located on the south from Sporne. And today there were a lot of discussion, a lot of topics, trying to understand which Bilogorovka the Ukrainians managed to get control over. So, according to the Russian sources map, they're saying that this Bilogorovka, this map has been updated with this update somewhere this morning, but at noontime, in the noon, somewhere 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., we got update that the talks was about this Bilogorovka that located near Sporne, because the Ukrainians are trying to attack the Russians in their flanks from this bridgehead between Sporne and Bilogorovka, trying to attack the Russians in their back, in their flank of the army that is currently trying to storm Bakhmut and entering the Bakhmut from the east side. So I suppose that there were talks about this Bilogorovka, but not about this one. Furthermore, if you take a look at the Western sources map, you see that this map is not updated, because I think that if the Ukrainians were able to take Bilogorovka, I suppose that the Western source map would be the first resource that would be updated on this matter. But as we can see, there is no changes. Now we are moving to the south from this bridgehead, from Seversk bridgehead, in direction of Bakhmut. Today we got a lot of very interesting updates from this area. The Russians continue storming Bakhmut. They managed to establish control over the industrial zone, and now there are heavy clashes in the east residential part of this town. Furthermore, today we got update from the south of this area that the Russians established control over Novoselovka Drugaya. This one, and the Russians attacked Kurdyumovka, and they're storming this town. Their artillery and rocket shelling forced the Ukrainians from the east part of this town move to the west part of this town just to be on the safe side. It's just a regular Russian tactic. They do the same. They did the same in the previous operation. We saw this tactic in Vysokopolye, and these towns like in Kherson district, like Vysokopolye, like Olgina, when the Ukrainians started, Arkhangelska, when the Ukrainians started their storm operation, the Russians left their front positions and they moved to the south of each town just to be on the safe side. And if situation is critical, they always have possibility to retrieve it without losses or with reduced losses as much as possible. So this is the situation, I suppose, with Kurdyumovka. Furthermore, a few days ago, we got updated the Russians took control over this Mayorsk, this railroad station. So if we take a look at the Western sources map, and if we update this map according to these updates, we understand that the Russians got control over Nikolaevka the second, and over this railroad station. So as you can see, we see and we understand that the Ukrainians still have some forces in the area, in towns like Dacha, Bakhmutka, Bandarivka, Zaitsevo. I'm not sure that there are a lot of forces, but they're encircled. At least it's some kind of tactical encirclement, because there is no more. It's operational encirclement. So there is no more roads in this area that these soldiers are able to use for retreating. They still can use the local roads and fields, but anyway, all these roads is under fire control. So I suppose that anyway, sooner or later, we're going to see entire collapse of this small cauldron or small bag in Zaitsevo, Bandarivka, Bakhmutka. And the Russians, of course, continue developing their offensive operation in Kurdyumovka. And this is a very dangerous situation for the Ukrainians. We discussed this many times, because if the Russians are able to take these towns, then they will establish control over a very big bridgehead right between all towns, all important fortresses in this area, like Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, Konstantinovka, and York agglomeration. And if we're talking about Kurdyumovka, from this area, there is just like 11 kilometers to each of these towns, and of course, from this area, the Russians will be able to cut supply between these four towns. If we're talking about the Ukrainians, of course, after finishing their counter-offensive operation in the north of Kharkiv area, they're moving forces to the south as fast as they can. Furthermore, today we got a lot of updates that the Ukrainians, because of a lot of difficulties with the railroad station, with the railroad transporting, they're using towns and they're using regular tracks for transporting the tanks and armored vehicles. And today we got a lot of videos like the Ukrainians moving their tanks, armored vehicles, just using the local roads and using the local regular tracks for these purposes. So the Ukrainians are moving to the south just for one reason: to be on the safe side and to be faster than the Russians, because as we discussed, the Russians has a bigger shoulder, support shoulder, and they need more time to move the forces from Izum bridgehead in direction of the south, and the Ukrainians need less time for these purposes. But so they are trying to use this feature, their benefit from this special operation, and we discussed yesterday that the Russians understand this benefit, and I suppose that sooner or later they are going to reduce these benefits as much as possible. So this situation near Kurdyumovka, Zaitsevo. Now let's move to the south, to Donetsk region. Today we got update that Ukrainians were trying to start some storm operation in direction of Donetsk. There was like a video of that they were trying to attack Peski from the north. They used around 50 soldiers and a few tanks, but they were spotted and they were destroyed by the Russians while moving in these trenches and so on. I think that was some kind of requiem combat, trying to understand the Russians and the DPR position in this area and so on. Now we're moving to the south, and according to some Russian sources, now we're going to discuss the area between Vasilievka and the Ugledar, this line, this Zaporozhye front line. Some Russian sources are saying that this night of 14th of September, so we can say that upcoming night, is the night of starting of offensive operation, counter-offensive operation of the Ukrainians on the south. The Ukrainians managed to collect a lot of forces near Ugledar, near Velika Novoselovka, of course near Orekhov and near Gulyai-Polye. And as you can see, the front line is very big, and of course the Ukrainians has already, I suppose, prepared a lot of ways, a lot of destination of their attack, and they will try to use every single road, every single way, just with one purpose: to develop as much as possible and to cut these two areas from the Russians' areas from each other, like to cut their supply. If we take a look at the Western sources map, as you can see, there are not much towns in this area. There are a lot of small villages, but anyway, there are a few important towns. The first one is Vasilievka. Vasilievka is a civilian, let's say, area. The Russians and the Ukrainians are using this road between Vasilievka and, let's say, Malaya Katerinivka, this road as some communication road. For example, if we're talking about the power plant inspectors, they were using this road to move in direction of this power plant. So this area is like demilitarized area. There are some heavy clashes, mainly artillery duels, but this road, both sides are using for communicating between the areas in the south of Ukraine. Another important town is Tokmak, this one. If we take a look at Tokmak, you're going to see that this town is located on a very big river. This river, and it's not very easy to attack Tokmak in the front, because before you need to attack, first you can't attack in front, you need to go a little bit to the east and to attack in a very wide like tunnel in this area to attack Tokmak in front. So it's also not very easy job. If the Russians have enough of forces there, it won't be like an easy job for the Ukrainians. Another important town in this area is Pologi. This town is located right in front of Gulyai-Polye, and this is the weakest point in the Russian defense system, configuration on the south of Ukraine. And I suppose that Ukrainians will use this situation, that this is the weakest point in the Russian defense system, and I suppose that if the Ukrainians are planning to start any counter-offensive operation this night, they will attack this town. Another important town in the south of Ukraine is, of course, Chernivka area. This cross, as you can see, there is a very powerful, very important logistic railroad cross that the Russians are using to support at least 4 parts of the south of Ukraine: Melitopol, Pologi, Berdyansk, the port in Berdyansk, Mariupol, and Volnovakha. So this is the very important area, and of course the Ukrainians will try to use the benefits they have to attack this area. And if we're moving to the east, we see that there are a few towns like Bilmak, Rozovka, and Volnovakha. These 3 towns, yes, of course, they are also very important, but I'm not sure that Ukrainians at the upcoming phase of their counter-offensive operation are very interested in these towns. Now let's discuss about maybe the possible way how the Ukrainians are planning to start any offensive operation. And of course, as we discussed, the Ukrainians will try to attack Pologi, this town. This town is located on the river as Tokmak, but as you can see, the Ukrainians, they have their position on the Russian side of this river. So you can see that there is no difficulties for the Ukrainians to attack this Pologi from Gulyai-Polye from the north, just with one purpose: to pin down the Russians in this area, and after that from Orekhov using this road to attack in direction of Pologi from the west. And with these 2 attacks, they will be able to take Pologi easily. I think that Ukrainians are going to use the same tactic as they used in Kherson district, but with one important difference, and the difference is that at the first day of counter-offensive operation in the north, the Ukrainian passed something around 50 kilometers. 50 kilometers, but the thing is that we remember that the Russians moved all their forces from the north. They did the regrouping pretty successfully without, we can say, without losses, or reduced the losses as much as possible. By the way, there is one important note about Kharkiv area. Today the Russians are saying that they left entire north of Ukraine, but the Ukrainians, they understood the situation, that they stuck on the north of Kharkiv district. Meanwhile, the Russians started regrouping to the south, trying to reinforce this area and to be on the safe side here. The Ukrainians even didn't enter every single town in Kharkiv district. So the Russians left, but the Ukrainians haven't entered these towns. Some of these towns, the Ukrainians entered some of these towns, but I can't tell you the real number, but the Russians think that a very big number of towns that the Ukrainians haven't entered yet, because they understand that that was some kind of goal of the Russians, to stretch the forces, to pin them down, to force them to stay there, to start filtration process, to clear this area, to enter every town. And of course, this area is very huge, so that's why the Ukrainians, for these purposes, they need a lot of forces and a lot of time. The most important, they need a lot of time. So that's why the Ukrainians discovered the Russians' plans, and they decided not to do this job, to drop all these towns, and they started their regrouping in direction to the south. So we stopped in Pologi. So the Ukrainians will try to take control over this town, and after that, because of the fact that there is no barriers between Pologi and the Ukrainian territory, they will be able or to take this town, or at least to block this town from the south, as they did in Kharkiv district, was the town by the name of these towns. If you remember, Yakovenkova, the Ukrainians didn't storm this town, they passed this town by, and they just blocked this town and moved in direction of Volokhov Yar. This is the only town that they were trying to storm and took, and as soon as they did this, they moved from Volokhov Yar in direction of Kupiansk without storming any town. They were just blocking them and moving further. So the same thing they're planning to do here as well. Just because Pologi has their defense line, defense structure of defense configuration, and I don't think that it will be a very easy job for the Ukrainians to take control over this town. But anyway, they won't do this at the first days or the first hours. The main goal is just to block this town, and after that to move to the south in direction of this cross, as we discussed, the cross that connects the four parts of this front line: Berdyansk, Tokmak, Pologi, and let's say Volnovakha or Mariupol. So they need to establish control over this cross as fast as possible, and as fast as possible. But one important note: we need to calculate the distance that Ukrainians need to cross before they will be able to take this territory. As you can see, there is around 23 kilometers from the north to the south, and there is something around 31 kilometers from, let's say, Orekhov to Pologi. So the Ukrainians, as you can see, this is the straight line, but there is like a wave line. So as we understand, the Ukrainians need something around 70 kilometers to pass, something around 70 kilometers using the roads to get this area. 70 kilometers, remember this number. Because during the Kharkiv offensive operation, the Ukrainians passed 50 kilometers during the first day. But there is two very important differences. If we're talking about Kharkiv area, the Ukrainians knew, and you can find this information on the internet, that they knew that there are not much of Russian forces, and they were 400% sure that they will be successful. The only thing that they didn't know how much success they will achieve during the counter-offensive operation in the Kharkiv. If we are talking about the south, I'm trying to explain you the logic of fuel, because fuel in this counter-offensive operation, logistic fuel, will be the most important part, because the Ukrainians, they understand that they need to move there, they need to have fuel in their trucks, in their tanks, in their armored vehicles, they need to have fuel to get there, and if something goes wrong, because the Ukrainians are not 400% sure that they will be successful there. And they need to be 100% sure that if they will be defeated here, they need to have fuel to go back. This is very important. So that's why their logistic distance they can cross during one day is very limited. Yes, of course, they always are planning. They will have some trucks with fuel within every single group, but not like this. They will have some fuel trucks with them in each group, but I don't think that every single group is going to have fuel trucks that can support them, supply, and if anything go wrong, they will turn back and go back. So this is very important. So as we see, to take this focal point on the south of Ukraine, they need at least to cross 70 kilometers. Furthermore, they need to do some stop. They need to spend some hours on some lines to check some territory. So these 70 kilometers with always run engine means that you need to have something that you will spend fuel for at least 200 kilometers in this area. So I'm not, as I know, the Ukrainian tanks and the Ukrainian armored vehicles have like the if they use tank, they can pass something around 450, 500 kilometers. So as I see, my understanding of this situation, if the Ukrainians want to be on the safe side, during the first day, they won't do this like a massive rush that they did in Kupiansk, trying to get it the first day from Orekhov toward Berdyansk. They will stop on the middle of the line, trying to understand if they're on the safe side. Because if they are not, they need the same fuel to go back. They don't have possibilities to lose their tanks and artilleries or armored vehicles and so on. So this is the first direction to block Pologi and to move to this cross. And now let's talk about the area between Vasilievka and Tokmak. As you can see, as we discussed at the beginning of this video, highly unlikely that Ukrainians are going to use this road, this black line, to attack Tokmak in front. I'm not sure that they're going to do this, but anyway, they will send some group using this road just with one purpose: to establish fire control and to get the suburbs of this town, and with one purpose: to cut this road that connects Tokmak and Pologi. They need to cut to establish fire control and to be sure on the safe side that the Russians are not able to use the reinforcements on the ground from Tokmak in direction of Pologi. So they need to cut this road. And after that, they will stop. They will try to to block this town from the north, trying to cut all the roads that they are able to do, to block from the north and to pin down the Russians in Tokmak with one purpose. As you can see, there is a road that connects to Vasilievka, so they need to be sure that the Russians are not able to send the same forces from Tokmak in direction of Vasilievka, because if you remember, yesterday we discussed that Tokmak is one of this tactical reserve center. Tokmak, we discussed, Melitopol, Mariupol, and Kherson, this like tactical reserve center. But if we're talking about the Tokmak, it's like on the front, it's not in the tactical. The Melitopol is the tactical reserve center. So they will try to block this road. And as they did in Kharkiv offensive operation, they will attack not in direction of Vasilievka, because Vasilievka is on the safe side. There are a lot of roads, railroad, regular road on this area. There is a river. You need to do a lot of unnecessary actions to storm Vasilievka. So that's why I suppose that the Ukrainians are planning to use this road, and they will try to attack between Vasilievka and Tokmak in direction of road M30, then in direction of road M18, and after that in direction of Mikhailovka. This town, this is the main goal, and this is the main purpose of the Ukrainians of the first day of their counteroffensive operation. No matter what, no matter losses, no matter anything, they need to get Mikhailovka, this town, because as you can see, there is also a lot of roads that moves from Mikhailovka, and if the Ukrainians are able, with one rush, with one short jump in 50 kilometers to get Mikhailovka, they will be able to split the north in two parts, and the Russian forces in Vasilievka will be encircled or will appear in operational encirclement. And from Mikhailovka, from this area, they will be able to block reinforcements from Melitopol, because they will be able to the next day or the same day to send some forces to the south just to block this cross, and with help of forces, with help of Brechet and Mikhailovka, they will be able to develop their offensive operation in direction of Dniproprudne, and after that in direction of Energodar. So this is their Ukrainian as I see, it's my understanding. I'm not sure. Maybe the Ukrainians have another opinion about their counteroffensive operation, but I did a small analysis, trying to understand, trying to copy their logic and their tactic in the previous counteroffensive operation, and I see that they will do something like this. They are not planning to attack like unnecessary towns like Vasilievka, like Palogi, like Takmak. They will try to block most of them, like Takmak, Vasilievka, Palogi, and the main town that they need to take control is Mikhailovka and this cross. So this is two focal points that Ukrainians need to get during the first day. If they are able to do this, then we can say that they are able to continue develop their offensive operation in this area. Furthermore, don't forget about the guerrilla forces Ukrainians that located in Melitopol, in Berdyansk. They are there. I'm sure about this. And of course, these forces is waiting for the main Ukrainian forces, one purpose, to raise some cope in this area and to meet their Ukrainian forces. So we can say that this is the operation on the west side of Zaporozhye front line. The second front line is near Ugledar. The Ukrainians also managed to collect a lot of forces near Ugledar, Novovelika, Novoselovka. And as I understand, the main goal of these forces is not to take control over some territories or something like this. The only thing they need is to pin down the Russians and to cut the road between Donetsk People Republic and the central part of Zaporozhye, of this front line, and Melitopol. For these purposes, as far as I understand, as far as I know, I read a lot of channels, a lot of military experts, and they have opinion that, of course, the Ukrainians will try to return control over Mariinka. The Ukrainians will try to return control over Peski. And the Ukrainians will try to develop their offensive operation from Avdiivka in direction of Isinovata. And all these operations, I don't think that Ukrainians are able to return control over Peski or Mariinka, but anyway, the Ukrainians, the Russians, or the DPR forces will have to stand there and to give a fight to the Ukrainians, because they can't lose these positions, because they spend a lot of time and they waste a lot of souls, a lot of their soldiers to take these territories, and they can't allow themselves to lose these territories like in Peski and Mariinka one more time. So that's why they will stand there. Of course, the Ukrainians will be defeated in this area, so this is not the main goal to take these towns. The main goal is to pin down. As soon as they understand that the mission of Ukrainians in the south failed or completed, no matter, they will receive an order to retreat, and of course these forces will go back on their positions. If we're talking about Ugledar, there is one important town, Mykolaisk. According to the Russian sources, this town is under Russian control, and today I tried to find some information, and I got confirmation. Yes, this town is under Russians, not under the Ukrainians. So on this front line, the Ukrainians will try to attack Mykolaisk from many sides, and they will try to develop their offensive operation from Yegorovka. And of course, in this area, the main goal of the Ukrainians is town by the name of Dokuchaevsk, but the Ukrainians won't be able to take Dokuchaevsk. They will be able just to pin forces in this area down and to block this town, because if you take a look at the Russian sources map, Dokuchaevsk is the town that was on the Russians on DPR since 2014, and there are a lot of trenches, and of course the Ukrainians won't be able to take control and to crack these trenches. They will be blocked, and the thing is, they need to cut the road, and this is what are they going to do in this area. And they will try to cut this road H20 that connects Volnovakha. There are also railroad station that connects Mariupol with the central part, so that's why they need to do this, to do something with this. And there is a front line between Gulay Polya, these fields. I will mark this with the cross. And my opinion, my projection, that Ukrainians are not planning to attack this area, because there is nothing inside of this town, inside of this area. There is no big towns, there is no like important logistic crosses, railroad stations, and so on. So I'm not sure that Ukrainians are going to attack or to develop their offensive operation in this area. It's like the useless waste of time. The main thing to get as close as possible to Energodar and to cut the supply from the DPR to direction of this area. Now let's talk about Kherson district. Today I got more and more updates that the Ukrainians also are planning to start counter-offensive operation in this area at the same time with the counter-offensive operation near Zaporozhye. For one reason, we understand why. They need to pin down the Russians, they need to pin down the reinforcement, they need to force the Russians, they need to make them not flexible, not mobile, and with help of this operation, a lot of Russian reserve will be moved to this direction just with one purpose: to stop the Ukrainians. Because as we know, the Ukrainians have at least 3 bridgeheads in this area. The one near Andreevka, Belogorka, Kostромka, Bezymyana, in this area, and of course they will try to develop their offensive operation to take control over Bruskinsky, and with help of this they will cut the road that connects Velika Alexandrovka and Arkhangelska, let's say the north part of this area with Kurakhova, Novokakhovka, and of course the Ukrainians will try to develop their offensive operation from Novovoskresenska, Novovoznесенska, from this area, trying to take more towns and other towns in this area. And believe me, they will be able to do this because the Russians artillery and the Russians aircrafts is not endless, and they are not able to focus at the same time and to be in every single place at the same time. And of course the Ukrainians will try to develop their offensive operation in the direction of Kherson. Today we got a lot of fake news that the Russians left Kiselyovka, that Ukrainians managed to take this town, because Kiselyovka is the final town in front of Chernobyevka, Kherson, and if the Ukrainians are able to take this town, then the next target is Kherson. But today the governor of Kherson visited Kiselyovka, and he reported the video confirmation that this town is still in the Russians. So the Russians prepare themselves, everybody prepare themselves. And I'll remind you one more time that there was the first offensive operation in Kherson district where the Ukrainians were defeated and they lost a lot of soldiers. The second offensive operation, counter-offensive operation, was in direction of Zaporozhye power plant. They were also defeated. The third counter-offensive operation was in Kharkiv district. There are a lot of different opinions. Some people are saying, the Ukrainians, the Western people are saying that was very successful counter-offensive operation. The Ukrainians managed to return control over a lot of territories and so on. I'll give you my opinion about this situation. I think that yes, the Ukrainians were successful, they returned control, but as I told it at the beginning of this video, they haven't entered even every single town that the Russians left, because they understand that it's not like the thing they need. They need to start their offensive operation in the south, and they don't need to spend their soldiers and time trying to do filtrations on the north in this area. So yes, the Ukrainians returned, but my opinion that we can say that there is nobody, like everybody won from this situation. The Ukrainians got their territory, and the Russians managed to do their regrouping very successful. They haven't lost their soldiers, their army. The Westerns are saying that they lost more than thousands of prisoners of war, but I haven't saw even a picture or video of that. Furthermore, the Russians managed to establish their front line on this flank, and they don't need a lot of forces to keep this area because of the natural barrier as a river Oskol. The Russians managed to stop the Ukrainian penetrating and their breakthrough near Liman. So that's why I think that the Russians also were successful there, and they managed to move their forces to the south. They need more time, and I'm not sure that the Russians completed their regrouping. According to my understanding, it's my feeling, there is no even numbers, I suppose that the Russians completed their regrouping somewhere for 80%. So this is the reason why the Ukrainians are so in a hurry trying to start their offensive operation as fast as possible, because they understand as soon as the Russians are able to move their Izium army to the south, the third military corps to the south, they will have no chances to start any counter-offensive operation because they will be defeated. And the final thing, we need to wait this evening, because if the Ukrainians do really plans to start counteroffensive operation in this area, I believe that the Russians will shut down the entire Ukraine from electricity one more time. This will be like not like the focal point, this will be the real flag. So if the Russians shut down the Ukraine, trying to cut them from their electricity facilities, that means that Ukrainians started their counteroffensive operation. So let's see. We'll see, and we'll follow this situation as well. Now let's and about the day, if you remember, a few days ago the Russians cut the Ukraine from electricity facilities. They did this like day before yesterday, and they attacked the railroads, they attacked the Ukrainians on the marsh and something like this during the redeployment. And today the Russians gave the real number. So as a result of that shutdown, the Russians managed to destroy up to 800 of Ukrainians all along the Ukraine, like on the road, on the railway station, near Kharkiv, near Donbas occupation. So 800 soldiers, just because they managed to shut down the electricity, to block the Ukraine, and with help of this they managed to destroy a lot of convoys, a lot of Ukrainian groups, and so on. Let's discuss one more time the Russian sources icons. As you can see, on Zaporozhye region, the Russians attacked the 128th Defense Brigade, warehouses of 44th Brigade. They destroyed few drones in this area. Also, they attacked the headquarters in this area, another warehouse in this area. So as you can see, there is like artillery preparation from both parties. The Ukrainians are trying to prepare, the Russians are trying to reduce the Ukrainians' possibilities. The same situation near Ugledar. There is like drones that was shut down. Another headquarters were destroyed, and also today there was some kind of recon combat from the Ukrainian side. They have demined this area, and of course they have demined their own mines, and now they need to understand if there are enemies' mines. So that's why they sent some commandos trying to figure out the situation between Igorovka and Nikolska, because this is the main area of their attack, trying to split this area into pieces as well. If we are talking about this area one more time, the Russians got Novoselo-Kavtoraya, and they're attacking the 53rd Brigade in Kurdyumovka. So as you can see, we return to the situation we started before the counteroffensive operation. Now the Russians again on the safe side. Yes, they did their front line shorter. They lost a lot of territories, but now they're very compact, they're very mobile, and they're ready to defend the south of Ukraine. And the question is whether the Ukrainians ready to take these territories back. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you that we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.